Welcome everyone. I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage in Southern California. We're holding our monthly tech meet. What we're going to talk about today is something that I don't usually talk about too much, and that's going to be an Arnage. Rolls-Royce and Bentley went through some changes and transitions. These particular models came out in 1998.
We have one, is the maintenance cost a major reason for low resale value?
That's one of them. That's a huge factor, especially I remember that the Silver Shadows, when I first started working on cars and I started on Rolls-Royce and Bentley back in 1979. I worked on nothing but Shadows. All I did was hydraulic work, cooling system work, leaks, some suspension work. They're hard on suspensions. And then time goes by. I took this business from my dad in 2005, which is 15 years ago. Hardly ever worked on Silver Shadows. The reason? It cost so damn much to fix them, and they weren't worth anything. Okay? So in answer to that question, yes, the reason you see cars go so cheap at auction or are selling for cheap is the fact that it costs so much to properly maintain them. Plus, most of the cars have a huge list of deferred maintenance. So let's say you get in your mind, okay, I want to buy one of these cars, I want to enjoy it. Before you do that, and I have conversations almost on a weekly basis with prospective new owners, they say, what does it cost to maintain one? I said, well, maintenance for a year is not much, but you're going to have repairs, especially on an old car. And I just tell them, be prepared to spend $5,000 a year. Okay, that's a nice, safe estimate just to drive it. Okay, and that should cover your maintenance and most regular repairs. It doesn't cover a catastrophic one. And usually the answer is, well, this one's in really good shape. Okay, which means it's beautiful. Okay, that's fine. And I've got all the history on it. They've done all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. Be prepared to spend $5,000 a year. Now, I say that number. I'm not saying that every car is going to cost every person $5,000 a year to keep on the road. On an average, that's what I see. And you take these old cars, most of them have a lot of deferred maintenance. When you're buying a car, you wonder, why are they selling the car? Okay, maybe they just got tired of those $5,000, $10,000 bills every year. Maybe that. Maybe they don't like it anymore. There's just so many factors. But to be honest with you, I own, I forget, 5 or 6 of these cars and 3 Jaguars. The Jaguars is the same kind of beast. I have older Jags, but they're really a great value to buy a high-end car, but they're expensive to maintain. Now, I have the distinct advantage if I can fix them, okay? And I can buy parts cheaper and all that kind of stuff, but I still have to fix them. My Turbo R is under the cover over there. I love that car. Every time I drive the damn thing, something else is wrong. Now I got a transmission fault coming on, and I'm sure it's in the wiring. There's something funky in the wiring. But since everybody out there wants me to fix their car, I don't have time to fix my own.
Right.
Yes.
Is it okay to clean the spark plug and put it back in if there is oil on it because of the leak from the valve cover? This is on the 96 Spur.
Okay, now that doesn't make sense to me. Now, first of all, if there is oil on the plug on the outside, that's one thing. But if it's on the firing end, that's not from the valve cover. That's from inside the engine. If you have oil on the tip of the spark plug inside the engine, you got some engine problem. And you'll need to address that. Or you can clean it and it's just going to keep fouling.
Ronnie, is the cabin filter the same as the pollen filter?
Well, technically, yeah, the nomenclature, the pollen filter is the outside one. So if I can see it in here, and I will pull it out. So the difference, let me get out. This just snaps in on the side of the tunnel. This is the cabin filter. This one's dirty too. What this does is when you go to recirculation mode, that will take air from inside the cabin and keep recirculating it through the air conditioning system. That's where that air comes from. This is inside air. So you can see this has not been changed. Look at the filth on there. This is pretty simple one. Pollen filters are outside where the pollen is going to be. So the pollen's going to be, you know, in the atmosphere, whereas the cabin filter filters the recirculated air. So that one out there, the big ones out there, take outside air and feed the squirrel cage. This one down here takes inside air and feeds the squirrel cage. So typically when they're both plugged, you're really going to create it's going to be working against a vacuum. It's going to be really sucking. And that's what wears those motors out. And they're a BMW fan motor. That's what I buy for them. But it is, if you see this big tunnel here that goes up to the dash, right in the center is where your air conditioning unit is. You take that off and the blowers are bolted to the floor. I always recommend you never slam trunks, but this model, they came out with a nice feature that Cadillac had many, many, many years ago, where you just engage it and it closes it itself. Okay? Hear that motor? So don't slam these things.
If the car overheats just once, that's not going to affect the head gasket, right?
It shouldn't, so long as you turn it off and don't keep driving it. And that's a great question. If you start one of these cars, they've got a warning system built in to let you know you've got a thermostat problem. If you start it up and you start driving it down the road and it goes super hot and then pops over, that tells you that the thermostat has been hot enough that it has these, or at least the original ones have these little melt out plugs. They're called fail-safe plugs. And they have melted out and the car is not warming up properly. The computer gets confused. It's supposed to warm up real quick so it can go into closed loop, be emission efficient, reduce pollution. So if your thermostat is too cold, it's going to cause all kinds of issues. It's going to use a lot more fuel. It's going to eventually flag some codes. That temperature gauge, you'll see it goes up to about 200 and just stays there. And then when they overheat, all of a sudden it's 260. It doesn't creep. They don't creep. They just boom. It's too late usually. So as far as the head gaskets blowing on one overheat, it can happen. Okay, and symptoms for blown head gaskets are typically you can drive the car. Occasionally you see white steam, white smoke. White smoke is steam. And one car, it took me a long time to really point my finger at the head gaskets, but I would drive it, and when I park it warm, let's say I stop and I go into a store, come out, start it up, had a misfire. No steam, but it just misfire, and then it went away. Only when warm. So what's happening is when you turn that car off, the engine gets a little hotter, and if the head gasket's leaking, it's going to let some water into that cylinder, whatever cylinder is leaking. And when you go to start it, it's got to clear out that water. It's not going to fire right until it gets the water out of there. That's a good symptom. And this was a car, and it used coolant. Couldn't find it. Couldn't see it out the tailpipe. But it kept going down.